I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Hello, my friend.
Hello.
Here we
Welcome.
are together for episode 70. We'll talk a little bit about that later, a little celebration. But wanted to start with, we are now on the, I guess the term would be back end of Hurricane Melissa. And we've got some things coming up in the U.S. that are happening and coming into fruition as of tomorrow. So it's an appropriately scary, maybe, conversation, given that it's Halloween in the U.S. But
see what you did there.
Yeah, see what I did there. But I just want to check in with you and see how you're feeling, and give everybody an update on how things are going in your Isle of Wood and Water.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a bittersweet recording. And by the time people hear it, we will have been a little over a week out of the tail end of Melissa devastating Monaco Island, but also the beginning of what recovery efforts are looking like as people are trying to put things in order. And bittersweet for me because I am now learning more and more as I'm able to get in touch with people in my community, the level of devastation. And it is so much more than I could imagine. People don't have houses. And I, being raised in the US, don't even have a concept of what it would look like or feel like. And even coming out of living in South Florida, where we do have hurricane threats every year, the same type of hurricane season that the Caribbean experiences, and having gone through hurricanes on US territory, and also having the privilege, and again, people really need to be thinking about the privilege of movement, that I was able to get off of the island. And a lot of people that I am talking to are like, you're so lucky that you were able to actually get off the island. And I do feel that privilege of movement. And I've also felt the privilege of whenever there is a major natural disaster that occurs, that I've had freedom of movement. That's becoming a little bit more difficult. I want to be able to get back onto the island, and the Kingston airport is open, but that's 3.5-hour drive away from Montego Bay, which would mean if I did fly into Kingston, I would be received by people, but then putting people at risk to travel across the island to Montego Bay is not something that I'm choosing to do. So waiting to hear that the Montego Bay airport is open. As soon as it is open, I am going to get on a flight and try to get back there. I have not been able to have any reports on the home that I live in at all. So I'm not sure what the conditions are with the home. I am hoping that it is secure and safe. And I'm also believing that if there was some major damage, that somebody would have tried to get in touch with me as far as neighbors. And I've been trying to get in touch with them, but power is down in our area. I am in the area that was ravaged, but not my actual home. My home is in an area that's on top of the hill. So I'm blessed with that. And it's not built into the hill. It's, built on a flat level of the hill, so it's not at risk of sliding or having any homes, because I'm at the top, having any homes slide on me. The roads and the infrastructure throughout the entire parish, and this is St. James Parish in Montego Bay area that people are familiar with the name of, and that was one of the areas that was significantly hit.
I've been hearing about that, and I wasn't sure if that was your neighborhood or not.
Yeah, that is our the direct area, the direct airport, the communities that are in the mountains that are up Long Hill Road. For anybody who's familiar with Jamaica, those are the communities that we saw a lot of sliding, that there is no road anymore. There was barely road before, and now there's now it's mud and water.
Yeah.
I am hearing reports that U.S. aid has come, like organization called DART, which I'm not really familiar with, but I would have loved to have known more information about how they're going to help. And I'm curious about what recovery efforts do look like, especially for areas that have no method of being able to reach those communities, because there are communities that are up in the mountains that I can imagine the devastation, the lack of actual structural infrastructure of the homes being built. It's a major consideration, a major concern. And I'm not fear mongering in the way that I have witnessed and observed US reporting.
Mm.
I am acknowledging that the community of people that I am in touch with there, it's really hard to be in communication with anyone. The people that I know who are less resources do not have homes.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are living with people who do have homes sustain minimal damage. And so we're talking about 10 to 15 people in a home
Yeah.
with folks. My home could accommodate people. And this is why I do want to get there. One of the most vulnerable populations that I'm really curious about what this support is going to be is women and children in particular. And considering like the cultural context on the island where men are going to be in the position of like the physical rebuilding. And so if there's the possibility for a lot of violence if folks are not feeling like folks are contributing, or if there is a lack of food. I am hearing that people that were in the resorts that are unable to get off the island are not being able to be sustained in the way they expected on the resorts because, again, of infrastructure. And so they're trying to find other places to be until they're able to leave the island. So it's a really critical moment. And that's what I'm giving a book about. Like, I know that so many things are going on in the world. I know that here on US territory, when I reached out to my representative, who is also of Caribbean descent, to be like, okay, what can we do? She was like, I'm here to support, but I'm also really worried about people in our district who are not going to have food. And, and so tomorrow she's doing like a health fair and like a food drive and community, and the priority of dealing with the needs that are here in US territory. As people can see behind me, you're not seeing like the depth of the background that I was able to leave the island last Wednesday because I was planning to come to a conference before knowing the seriousness of this hurricane. So I did lock down my home, but not in a way that was actually hurricane proofing it and or allowing it to be a resource for people who did remain on the island and would have needed a place for shelter. So it's a bittersweet moment. I have a lot going on. There's a lot of pieces moving, trying to figure out how to help, trying to identify when I can get back to the island, trying to locate and communicate with some of the people that I love on the island that I know are in much more dire situations than the community that I actually live
Yeah.
in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a lot. It is a lot. I haven't spent most of what I've seen in terms of video of the destruction and the aftermath has been, circulating on the different socials.
Yeah.
I've started following quite a few folks from Jamaica on Threads, especially. They've been popping up a lot on Threads,
Okay.
and I'd heard the name of your area quite a bit, and I wasn't sure if that was where you were, because I have not had the the moment to come and visit you and get familiar with
I
where you
know.
are. So it'll come. It'll come.
Yes.
It'll
That's the
come.
energy. Mm-hmm.
But I can only imagine how. And we talked a little bit about this in the last episode, about how you're happy to not be there and not have to go through the terror that it can be to go through a storm, specifically one that large and strong
Mm-hmm.
and brutal. But then the heartstrings tug of wishing you could be there so that you could be there to open your home and to house people and to, I'm sure, roll up your sleeves and get into the mud to help. And yeah, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword, I can imagine. And while as a person who loves you, I'm glad you're safe, but I know how much you want to get back there. So, and I know you mentioned about resources and organizations that are helping, and we do have I wanted to share this slideshow. These are just some resources that you
Mm,
shared with me.
thank
So
you.
I created a
Yes.
slideshow of these. I had heard about a couple of these already. And so I wanted to make sure. So for those of you that might be watching this, you can certainly screenshot with any of these slides to get the information. And I'm also going to be putting these links, either this slideshow particularly on our link tree, or putting each of the links themselves onto our link tree, so that if folks want these resources, they can go and find it there. Either on our Instagram page, we have a link tree in our bio that you can click and get these resources. And I'm going to figure out how to put it on our website too, because we haven't done that yet, but that's on my list of things to do. So
Thank you
the
for that.
first one that I found, I stumbled across. I think somebody shared it on Threads. I was saying that I had a
Mhm.
lot of Jamaican folks that I'd started to follow. This is a website that seems pretty comprehensive. Supportjamaica.gov, and it had a lot of different information on it. It had current conditions, so updates. I didn't do a deep dive to see if it is naming like neighborhoods or areas of the island, but
It was
updates.
naming neighborhoods and areas. I'm
Oh, okay, it
interjecting.
is. Yeah,
It
okay,
also has some really good resources about where the major departments have kind of completed a checklist of the
okay,
needs that would be helpful for people to be considering gathering or providing support. And these are like a lot of rescue needs, a lot of
okay,
healthcare needs, because a lot of the healthcare facilities and agencies are down at the moment,
okay,
and also a lot of general survival supplies like
okay.
food, hygiene products, and things. People don't have their homes. So I have to like
Yeah.
reiterate that for those of us that come from a territory where a number of humans are housed. We have a
Mm-hmm.
large unhoused population in the US territory, but that's not the typical standard of expectation of living. There is some form of
Right.
housing and shelter. And so
Right.
have your entire home wiped away. What that means is that you don't have anything. You don't have your clothing, you don't have your food, you don't have your hygiene products, you don't
Nothing.
have, your memories, you don't
Medicines,
have any, you have
medicines, anything that you use to sustain your own life, yeah, is gone.
and governmental aid on a little Caribbean island is not at all what they do in the US. There is no
No.
provision, there is no government support.
FEMA,
That's
there's
not
no,
typical.
yeah.
And so people are really in the community with mutual aid. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
in this episode, but doing mutual aid. So when people are asking for things, when folks are on social media and they're asking you to send
Mm-hmm.
gifts that then can translate into money, it's a serious need, because all of the things that we are comfortable with to live are gone.
Yeah.
It's wiped
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. You know what it makes me think of? And I might be aging myself a little bit, but Hurricane Andrew. I don't remember
Mm,
what year Andrew was. It was
mm.
in
The
it was
early
in
2000s, I believe.
early 2000s, or I was almost going to say the 90s, maybe the end of
Mm,
the, yeah, maybe early
mhm,
2000s. And
mhm,
it was in Florida,
mhm.
and that got the hardest hit. And I remember seeing the videos of aerial, helicopters flying over and taking video, and just complete and utter, every house gone, absolutely every structure gone. And so it just reminded me of that when you were explaining that. So yeah, total devastation above and beyond, you know, uh, yeah, not even just tarps on roofs, but houses gone.
Gone
So
completely.
so that's the website for Aid Jamaica. The next one that you shared with me was the United Way of Jamaica. You want to speak to this a little bit?
Um, Again, these are all resources
Mm-hmm.
that have, you know, erected to provide support.
Yep.
I would invite community members who are trying to offer help and support um, to contact, in your 6 degrees of separation, somebody who you might know
Yeah.
in Jamaica. If you ever visited the island and you still have a contact for somebody that you visited on the island, the first go to, because I've been on the island for a year and a half, the first go to I would offer support of is direct relationships. Because
Mm-hmm.
if money is going to go to the island, it's going to go to these big organizations.
Right.
And the reality is that living there for a year and a half and being in a community that's very well resourced and very privileged, we still didn't have roads.
Yeah.
We still didn't have all the
Yeah.
resources. We know
Right.
that from Burrow, a ton of money came in. I know a ton of farmers that didn't get any, government subsidies from that.
Right.
And
Right.
so I'm asking people to do their due diligence when they are thinking about who and where they're supporting, to make sure that they're connected with the people that they're supporting, to make sure that it's really getting to the communities of need.
Mm-hmm.
And my first line of recovery, defense and operation is if there's a 6 degrees of separation of somebody that you know on the island, it makes much more sense for you to send $100 or $500 directly to someone you know.
Yeah.
That's the truth of the matter. And then if you decide that you want to pour into these like kind of larger national and international organizations, then your due diligence, making sure that you know where the resources are getting distributed.
That's a really great point. And I know we have a couple of the larger American Red Crosses on here as well. And I'm always a little wary of those larger organizations. Any nonprofit that has a leader that makes in six figures a year, and I know these are big organizations and it takes a lot to run them, but it always makes me a little skeptical about where the money's going and whether or not the people are getting it. So that's really interesting to hear what you just relayed about how Hurricane Beryl that happened last year, that all of the money that poured into the island, the roads never got fixed. So, or at least a significant portion of them didn't get fixed.
I
So,
mean, we're seeing it. Like, I
yeah,
mean, it's not
yeah,
I'm just speaking it, but you're
no, no,
actually
no,
seeing if the
yeah,
road infrastructure, was developed up in the way that it should have been,
yeah,
there would be more avenues for people to get the care that they
right,
need in this moment.
right, right. And movement,
Mhm.
just we know how that can be so incredibly isolating for people to be able to rebuild, as if they can't move anywhere out of their immediate
Painful.
vicinity, then they can't. Yeah, that's the best they can do. Our next one that we had on that list was American Friends of Jamaica, and I actually found this website when I was looking around, and then I saw it was on your list. And again, another large organization that you know I don't know. We can't really speak to the transparency of that organization and what the works they're doing. We just want to get this information out to people,
Absolutely.
just in case it is of help to them, but not necessarily vouching for for any of these organizations and the amount of help that they're able to give. Give directly. Now, this was interesting. This was on your list, and I thought the description of this was really interesting. That Give Directly will deliver emergency cash directly to Jamaican households. I don't know how you would track that transparency of that or the efficacy of that,
Yes.
but I thought the concept was a good one if that is indeed what they're able to do. So that is another resource that, but I really want to reiterate, if in case somebody just joined us or they weren't listening before, that I love the suggestion that the best way to make sure that you're getting money directly to the people that need it is by direct contact.
Absolutely.
If you know someone on Jamaica, if you've visited there before, if you don't live on the island and you visited there, even if you were at one of those all-inclusive resorts that we were talking about last episode,
Yeah.
if you happen to venture out and you made, a connection with a taxi driver or with
Yes.
somebody that was working at one of the tourist attractions that you went to, and you
That is
have
it.
their contact information, reach out to them directly, and ask them, how are they? If you can get a hold of them,
That
how
is
are
it.
they and what do they need? And try to put your money there. So I wanted to
And
reiterate that
Jamaicans
because
are a proud people. So that's the
yeah.
other part that, I want, like there's a social media narrative about folks are being unserious. And I am inviting people to be curious about how unseriousness is manifested. One of the
Okay.
things that I love about being on the island of Jamaica is the resiliency of the people. And I think that that is extremely incredible to see how people are happy to just be alive. People are happy that their family members are alive, even though the material things that coming from a capitalist upbringing would
Mm-hmm.
matter a lot. That's not what folks are going to be primarily considering. They're thinking about their communities, they're thinking about their families,
Yeah.
they're thinking about their housing and their shelter, they're thinking about safety, and they are rejoicing. They are rejoicing in whatever their faith base is, that they have life, because what's important is having life, having gone through this huge devastation. The
Yeah.
joy, the laughter, the singing is the way that folks celebrate, the way that people maintain and hold their resiliency, the way that people have the motivation, and not just the motivation, but to the inspiration to
Yeah.
continue to rebuild their communities. And it's not the first time that the country has been devastated, maybe not with the level of devastation as a result of the hurricane, but there has been other types of devastation and famine and harm throughout the island.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, if you've ever been to Jamaica, many people are holding Jamaica so close to their heart, because there is something about the spirit of the island
Mm.
that carries on, even
Yeah.
amidst something so horrible and devastating. So yes, where I'm crushed that I'm seeing the road that I drive down every day, and all of the people, all of the places where I go and buy my fish to eat, my fresh fish is gone. So like it's gone. And I'm hoping that those people were able to find some shelter and didn't think that they were sheltering in their homes that were
Yeah.
right on the water, that is gone now. It's clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so really just thinking about the resiliency of the people, that when we're seeing people celebrating and joy and singing, and that is the way that folks are holding their spirit high so that they can continue to rebuild the country that everybody has enjoyed so much when they've gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and definitely the phrase that comes to mind is disaster porn, in terms
Mm,
of, and this is something that I've become more and more aware of in my own awareness and cognition, in terms
mm,
of watching things on social media, watching, for the past 2 years, watching videos of what's happening in Gaza, for example, that
mhm,
we become so desensitized to it, and we have an expectation of what we should see on the back end of any kind of disaster. And then and maybe this is uniquely USian, I don't know, but then have judgment about what we see, how people are responding. And yeah, I mean, I
we
don't know. I
cannot
don't,
be policing people's response. And we also
no,
recognize that there's a different cultural context about how you
right,
exist. There is,
right.
because the US holds so much foundational value in violence. The
Mm-hmm.
response to violence would be sadness, mourning, all of these ways that traditionally we would do
Thoughts
it
and
within
prayers.
US culture. Yeah,
Yeah.
within US culture. But in other places, because property, people are valued more than property in other
Right.
places. Caring for humanity is what the central focus is in other places. And then also like your own individual sustainability, because you don't have the same, you have community and mutual support that is existent and very strong on
Yeah.
the island. And then there's also this, if I don't go out and find my food for the day, I'm not going
Right.
to have food at night. So
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
also a different way of existing. And so we cannot police and or put US judgment on how people are maintaining their resilience and in the spirit of being able to rebuild their communities and their lives.
I think that's a huge statement, and I want to reiterate it because I think it's the root of so much of what we in the US, kind of the source of our judgment in the US, is that people are more important than property.
Mhm.
And in this country, when we talk about policing and we talk about the uptick in police violence, and the militarization of our police departments, and the all too familiar visual of cops in riot gear showing up to peaceful protests, it is it all of that is just to police property. It's not
Property.
it's not in care of humans.
Mhm.
All of the disappearings that are happening from ICE, that are snatching people off of the streets, is all about the caring of property and the caring of materials and resources that are not about humanity. So I think that's a beautiful statement and something that I want to encourage our listeners and viewers to think about, sit with a little bit. If that touched you somewhere in your spirit when Jay said that out loud, I want us to kind of sit with that a little bit and think about that. If you're watching videos of people in Jamaica or any of the islands that were impacted by the storm and you're seeing them dancing or making jokes or laughing with each other or embracing each other, check yourself if you start to feel some judgment around that. That's not about loving humanity. That's about judging and expecting a trauma response that fits within your narrative about how people
Right.
should respond. And that's something I think all of us need to do a little deep dive and introspection onto. So I
And
appreciate
come
that
with
reminder.
curiosity. Yeah. I mean, if
Yeah,
you've been in
curious.
Jamaica,
Yes.
if you've been in Jamaica, like
Yeah.
like if you see somebody that is like, what you see is the spirit of Jamaica. And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of it. That's the one love. That is the out of many, one people. That is
Absolutely.
the way that the energy flows on the
Mm-hmm.
island. That's the only way that I can think about it.
Yeah.
And it is important to be in consideration of curiosity, the trauma response judgment. Everyone's trauma response is going to be different,
Yep.
individualistic, community, culture wise, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
And we choose to rejoice in life and support human dignity and care and community with one another. And I wanted to just like, before we get towards the end, just thinking about what mutual aid efforts are going to be looking like on the island. So outside of the island, what it can look like for supporting mutual aid within the island. And I'm really glad that we have the technology that we have because it is allowing people to report what their needs are directly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I'm inviting people to look at individual connections and relationships if you want to provide some support on the islands.
Yeah. Thank you for that. You said mutual aid, and that's a perfect segue to talking about something that we've actually been wanting to talk about this now for a couple of episodes because it's been coming, but we wanted to give precedence to the people of Jamaica and to what was barreling down onto them, in the past week. But you and I talked offline. We talked a little about my journey of learning about what mutual aid was and the difference between mutual aid and charity.
Yes.
And we're going to roll into talking about the fact that tomorrow is November 1st. I'm going to timestamp this episode to let folks know that tomorrow is November 1st. And in the U.S. Right now, the government is in what we call a shutdown, which means it is not functioning. Every year, I believe it's every year, the government has to present a budget, and it has to be voted on by both sections of our Congress. And that budget did not get done this year. And above and beyond that, not only do they if they can't get a budget passed, then they usually pass something called a continuing resolution, which is in essence just well, we're going to give ourselves 6 more months to figure out the budget, but at least it allows the government to continue to function. They did not pass that continuing resolution this time, and there's a lot of back and forth about who's responsible for that. But in essence, as of right now, we're day 20 something, rapidly approaching day 30 of our government being shut down. And as a consequence to that, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but as a consequence to that, the major food assistance structures that happen in the U.S., namely they're called SNAP and WIC benefits. WIC is women and children, so that's going to be mothers and usually infants, I think, within the first year, but maybe even into the second year.
The first 5 years.
First 5 years.
The
Okay.
first 5
Thank
years
you.
of that.
Thank you for that correction.
That's women, infants, and children. That's the WIC program.
Yes, yes. So SNAP and WIC are going to stop or they will stop as of today. So no, tomorrow's November 1st. It's the start of a month. So these families that are receiving these benefits and have been receiving these benefits, that would be food and infant formula and things of that nature, are not going to receive them as of tomorrow. Now, the excuse is the government shutdown, but this is out of just straight up cruelty that they are stopping these benefits, because there is money in the reserve specifically earmarked for SNAP and WIC to keep it going, even if the government has been shut down. And our government, the U.S. government, is choosing not to use that reserve. So this is a choice. I want to be very clear. This is not because of the government shutdown. This is not because of anything except the fact that the U.S. government decided that they do not want women and children and families to eat for the month of November. So let's segue into, we've got some resources that we want to share with you all along those lines as well. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between mutual aid and charity, because I had to learn this. And I think it's it was an important lesson for me to learn, and I think it's important for others. So we wanted to speak into it a little bit. So I did look up definitions. So this is the definition, the textbook definition of charity. Charity is described as the voluntary giving of help, typically in the form of money, to those in need. Feels like a very basic, kind of surface level definition. And I think there are mindsets around charity that causes judgment, and that causes people to go into a place of judgment, not only for the people that are giving into the charity, but also the people that are provided for by the charity. And we hear tropes all the time about the lazy people that are just bleeding off of the system and that kind of thing. But also people that give to charities all the time, it can give you a sense of, oh, I'm doing something good, and pat me on the back, and I'm a good human because I give to charities. You and I have had those discussions in the past. And I don't know that is always, that feels very paternalistic to me, and feels very, it can feel very icky in terms of the people that give to charities. Now, the definition before I keep going, do you have anything you want to share into that? I'm rolling through it only because I'm looking at time, but what do you have anything
fine.
you wanted to share?
I do, because I do want to clarify when we're talking about assistance, and to tie it into the devastation that's happening on the island of Jamaica. Again, the government does not provide food assistance for people. So food scarcity on the island, what we're talking about on the island in particular, is that the hurricane wiped out a lot of the food crops. It wiped out the roads, which means that the people who have been farming the foods cannot bring their goods down to the community, to the farmers market where we all go and receive our supplies.
Right.
The infrastructure for food to be imported in, which is not, I don't use that type of food system. And most people in my community go to the farmers market where the farmers bring down our produce and groceries, except for like our meats and things like that are imported in. When you don't have that, when there is not some type of government assistance with food, then you have to figure out your own way to do it. And that is what's happening in the US. That's the relationship that I wanted to make. In the US, people that are used to relying on government assistance because they don't have the resources to be able to do that themselves. And the price of food in the US is particularly high right now.
Yes.
So it's really going to create an environment of chaos and need, the same way that we're seeing on the island of Jamaica. And the folks, to Deanne's point, the people that are receiving food assistance, I just really quickly looked up some of the statistics about it, that children receive the largest food assistance benefits in the United States. That's making up about 39% of the recipient population. For the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and that's SNAP. When we talk about supplemental assistance program, it's because we are trying to make sure that those 39% of children receiving the benefits, that they have the nutrition that they need to be healthy, to feel good, to be able to go into their schools, to have a learning day and not be hungry. So that's what some of these programs that we're providing are doing. After children, there's 20% of the elderly population, folks that might not be mobile to be able to go get food themselves, or if they are able to get food, they don't have enough resources to be able to buy their own food. Disabled population is also included in that number.
Yes.
And then the largest population of people in the United States at 34% that are receiving food assistance are white identified demographic. And there's always this misunderstanding that it comes from urban communities, that it comes from non-white identified people who are, raping the system of resources. But the truth of the matter is that that's not even, that wouldn't accurately be correct in the United States, because the largest population of racial demographic is a white identified human. And so to just think about like the way that the narrative storytelling is about who is receiving these benefits and support. And it really is the population of people in the United States that need it. That comes in the form of charity. And we are having to move and shift into a mutual aid model, because there's not going to be the amount of resources coming from our government helping to help people remain in their dignity and have the food that they need for their subsistence.
Yeah, thank you for that distinction on who is actually who is actually receiving from these programs, these government-run programs. And yeah, one of the biggest tropes is that it's people, non-white identified humans that take from this. But yeah, what was the percentage of white identified humans? I didn't hear that. And
white individuals make up the largest racial group of recipients, and that's at 35.4%.
35.4%. All right. Yeah. I wanted
of
to
the US population.
Yeah.
And that's white identified humans, because if they're the way that we identify demographics in the United States, on any of those type of government programs, they'll ask you if you're white identified, and then they'll ask you if you're Hispanic white identified or Hispanic Black identified. So that demographic of the 35.4% are white identified people, white on white folks.
White on white. White on white. And then the other piece of that I wanted to speak into was just another nuance of this. If you find yourself feeling, some sort of way about what we're talking about right now, is the concept, and I learned this, I don't know how many years ago, but it was fascinating to me, was the concept of corporations that utilize. It's not that corporations are utilizing these food assistance programs, but they are not paying their workers a living wage. So that corporations like Walmart and McDonald's, some of these really, really big, that they are making money hand over fist, are not paying their workers a living wage, so that the majority of their workforce is seeking and receiving assistance from these government run systems. And so, that's a corporate what's the subsidy, because they don't have to take that money out of their bottom line to pay their workers, because they know their workers can receive SNAP and WIC and these kinds of assistance programs from the government. So it's a lot deeper, folks. If you haven't really thought about this, I mean, I wonder, probably the majority of the people that listen to this podcast have thought about this before, but there's a lot of nuance to it, and we, as the U.S. public, have been fed a lot of propaganda. I'm going to use that word. We've been fed a lot of propaganda about this whole process and who utilizes. I mean, we are supposedly the richest country in the world. I'm using air quotes for those of you listening. And yet we have just an enormous amount of people, women, children, families that go hungry every day. And it's one of the most insane things about this country. And it's going to get even worse as of tomorrow. So thank you for those percentages, because I think, you mentioned that we moving from, a charity-based maybe system to a mutual aid-based system. And I wanted to put up the the definition that I found of
Thank you.
mutual aid. I'm just going to read this out real quick. Mutual aid
Mhm.
is the voluntary, collaborative exchange of resources and services to meet the needs of a community based on principles of solidarity rather than charity. I really liked that definition. I hear so many things in there that is so different than what we hear and originally think about when we think about charity, like collaborative exchange of resources and services, like based on principles of solidarity. I just, yeah, when you were describing what the people of Jamaica, how the people of Jamaica are responding in the wake of this devastation, mutual aid, that definition seems to really ring true to me.
Yeah, mutual aid helps to center human dignity and
Hmm.
give people access to the resources and the support they need with a care response that helps to be people to be connected. And I think
Yeah.
that that's what's critical, especially in these times when so much resources being we have the resources there, but it's being limited and gatekept.
Yeah.
And so this is an opportunity for us to do it a different way and show that a different way is possible.
Right, right. And to that end, I know we've been going through this really quickly, but I did put together. I want to give a shout out to a particular profile that I follow on Instagram called So Informed,
Mm.
and I love this profile. They put out really incredible information. So I want to give all props to them. These are their slides. I just captured them and put them on this slideshow because I thought they were super important. So, for any of you out there that have an Instagram account, go and follow So Informed. That's at so.informed on Instagram, and you'll be able to find this information because they put these slides together, and I just borrowed them for the purposes of this broadcast because I thought they were super important. So the first slide I've got up is a food assistance resources slide, and they do have on there the first resource that is on this list I thought was really interesting was called findhelp.org. And so this is going to be for folks on the U.S. territory. And I believe you put in your zip code and you can find food assistance, find free or reduced cost resources like food, housing, financial assistance, healthcare, and more. So it's not just food, it's all different kinds of resources that you may need. And you can find them based on your zip code. So I thought that resource was really interesting, and I'd never heard of that one before. So I was glad to learn about that. Had you heard about that one? I see the smile on your face.
No, but I love it. And I'm smiling because as you were providing this information, I did go and open up my Instagram and follow
Oh, good.
SO.INFORMED, So
Yep.
Informed on
So
Instagram.
informed.
And I just really appreciate that we have these opportunities to share this information in the way that we do
Yeah.
now, different
Yeah.
than before.
Yeah.
Because taking care
Absolutely.
of each other is critical.
Yeah. Yes, and more than ever, it's going to require, just as you were describing what was happening in Jamaica with communities helping communities, more than ever, this is an opportunity for those of us on U.S. territory who don't typically live like this, community to community. Do you know your neighbors? Have you got a relationship with your neighbors that if they were in need, would you know? And if if you don't have a relationship with them specifically, it can make those conversations really tricky, and because people want to be in their dignity and they want to, it's hard for people to ask for help. So creating relationships with your neighbors if you don't have them yet can set the stage for these conversations to be easier, and for them to not only ask for help but for you to say, hey, I've got this, and I can help with this. We have to be there for each other, and this is an opportunity for this country maybe to stretch those muscles a little bit and get a little better at that, because that's not how we typically do things in this country, unfortunately. So getting
And I
back
want
to
to keep on
slide two.
having this conversation about mutual aid because if we're looking at our political climates, what is being forced by our government is to be thinking about other methods of providing support to one another.
Right, right.
And that might be the direction that we need to go on, as much as we really abhor some of the ways that the shift is being executed. It also helps to necessitate and create in us an opportunity to come up with different solutions.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Based in community, solidarity, connection, all of these things.
Human dignity.
Yeah, and absolutely human dignity. So I just wanted to highlight a few more things on this slide, and then we'll go to the next one. I thought that was really interesting. I think the last one on this slide, find a mutual aid network providing food assistance in your area. And that is mutualaidhub.org. So the words mutual aid hub with no dots or anything in between .org. I thought that was really interesting because I do know that more and more communities are trying to develop mutual aid opportunities, and that has been happening, in the past couple of years specifically. And so, with
I
the
mean,
advent
mutual
of
aid has existed in non-Black communities throughout the
right,
history of the United States. So
yes,
I'm always
yes,
going to say none of this stuff is new. It's new to
it's
folks
not
that
new.
are
It's not
used to
new.
being resourced.
Yeah,
Mutual aid is how we've existed. I mean, mutual aid is when, we learn love thy neighbor, go knock on the neighbor's door for some sugar when you need to
yeah,
make some
yeah.
pancakes, or you know what I mean, when you need a ride to school. I know that I was doing mutual aid as a single mother with other single mothers,
Mm-hmm.
helping, like, who's taking the young people to school, who's picking them up, who's keeping them while somebody is working. Mutual aid exists in the way that we've been able to survive.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, thank you for that correction. You're right. I'm speaking through there. There I go, speaking through my white lens, of which is the point of the podcast. So I'm glad you called me in on that. Yeah, I am learning. Let me rephrase that. I am learning about mutual aid and and have become more aware of it in just recent years. But you're right. It's not new, and just because I'm new, it's maybe new to me, but it's not new. So I
or I'm
want
just
to.
offering to be in the consideration of the way that mutual aid has existed in your life, because I know
Yes,
that your mom did a lot of mutual aid love and support to communities around, when you were
she
growing up
did.
in the
She did.
Carolinas.
Yeah,
Was it
she
was
did.
would you call it more charity or mutual aid? Or maybe we should say this for the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's curious. Yeah, I'm. You can see my eyes are growing up. I'm thinking
Yes,
about what you're saying because, I think the mutual aid. If we were to use the example of my mom, I think the mutual aid aspect of what she did was opening her home to kids, friends of her children who needed a safe place to be. Um, the charity part was maybe giving money to different organizations, and which is not necessarily a bad thing if you know where it's going to how it's going to be spent and where it's going to go, and that it's actually I want to encourage people to be more mindful of, if you write that check, do your due diligence to find out the transparency of the organization that you're writing the check to. Don't just write the check
that's
and then
exactly what I was saying.
be able to put your head on the pillow that night and go, "Oh, I did something for needy people today." No, the
Have a
responsibility.
connection
Yes, and the
with where you're putting
responsibility
it.
is ours as the people that write the checks
Mhm.
to do our due diligence and make sure that those organizations that we're giving money to are transparent. And
I do
yes.
say that, but I also want to send a word of caution
Mhm.
that in checking on to make sure that there's some due diligence about where the services are being received, do not ask for more work on
Yes.
the
Yes.
communities and the people who are actually
Yes.
delivering the service to
Yes.
prove that impact, because we don't have time to be doing that. For
Yeah.
those of us who are actually delivering the services,
Mhm.
make sure that you're connected and trust the people that are delivering the services,
Yes.
and that you have a relationship with them to know, rather than
Mhm.
just writing a check and backing off of the process,
Yes.
but not asking for more work to be done with the people who are on the ground.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. So I don't know, getting back to my mom's example, I don't know how much she really did that due diligence piece. I don't know how much I mean, I think she had a relationship with the organizations that she gave to, but which I guess maybe is the point. But it's I just think it's something interesting for all of us to ponder and think about when we are making these decisions and we're moving through space. It's not to discourage anybody from, giving and connecting, and because a lot of these organizations do need funding specifically to be able to. One of the things that I've been hearing for food banks, and this speaks to what's happening tomorrow with the food assistance being cut off, is that food banks are really asking for money because they have special relationships with food resources that they could take your money, my money, and go and spend it in a way that gets much more bang for the buck than if I went to the grocery store and tried to buy a bunch of, non-perishable foods and then took them to a food bank. So that is a way for people, not to say that they won't take your non-perishable items if you have them and want to donate them, but it can be, in a lot of ways, it can be much more helpful for them to receive money, because then they can use it through their channels and get more food to be able to distribute. So yeah, it's multi-leveled, and it's important for all of us to really foster those relationships. And I love the reminder: don't create more work for the people that are already doing too much. Do your own research. Do our own research. Do your own. Google is your friend. Even though I'm trying to de-Google my life, you need to check your resources. So I'm just going to go through these slides quickly. And again, you can screenshot if you're watching us on YouTube, and we're going to put these resources on our in all the places that you can get them from our platforms. But they had a page on mental health resources, which I thought was really interesting and super important for these times, because we know a lot of people are really struggling with that. They had a slide for legal resources and national bail and bond funds. We know that over-policing is amping up. We thought it was high. It's already high, but it's certainly getting worse on U.S. territory, especially in the cities that the administration is sending the National Guard into. So these national bail and bonds funds are important, and it's a way for me to give here in my state and in my community, to give to a national bail fund that might help people in those cities where the National Guard is going, where ICE is snatching people up. So we want folks to be thinking about that as well. And then healthcare resources, they had a whole slide on some websites that could really give folks more information on how to access healthcare resources. And this is going to be, people are going to have different needs in different states, because we know that some states are being super, super restrictive on who can access healthcare. And then also, too, tomorrow is another deadline for, speaking of healthcare, tomorrow is the opening for the renewal process if you get your healthcare through the national marketplace. So we're talking about the Affordable Care Act. It had a nickname applied to it, which was Obamacare back in the day, and a lot of the resources to that and the access to that has been cut. Specifically, people's access to subsidies, which would offset, based on their income, would offset what their monthly premiums would be. So I've got my insurance through the marketplace right now, and I have been getting notices almost every day that the access to, the requirements and things have changed. You may not apply, or you may not qualify for subsidies anymore, because this administration has been cutting that severely back. So tomorrow is the opening for that renewal window. And so if you have your health care through a marketplace, through the Affordable Care Act, then you might be impacted by some of these cuts that are pulling back. So healthcare resources, that is our next slide. And then housing resources. We know that people are really, the cost of housing has just gone through the roof in the U.S., and a lot of people are facing houselessness as a result. So this is a page that has housing resources on it. It's not state specific. So I think most of these are nationwide in terms of the U.S. territory. So hopefully you can find some resources there that might be helpful to you. And then our next slide is mutual aid resources, and we talked a little bit about this before. And at the bottom of this slide, I thought was really interesting, ways to contribute to your local mutual aid network. So I want people to really take a look at that and see how you can get involved in, if you aren't on the ground in some sort of mutual aid capacity already. These are just some ways to get you thinking about how you might be able to get involved in the mutual aid network that is in your community. So want people to check that out. And then further resources are just some other websites that people can check out. And this is a lot to do with immigration, with people getting snatched up by ICE. There's a live map of ICE sightings. There's a website for that, deportationtracker.live. There is a Know Your Rights website that's connected to the ACLU, so that if you, and this is important for people that may identify as white, may think you're safe from ICE intervention, and may think this isn't going to touch you. It's important for you to know what the rights are of the humans that are walking next to you on the street, that are living next to you in your neighborhoods, or that are shopping at your grocery stores, or that work at your favorite restaurants. It's important for us to know what rights are for any humans in our country, so that if you see ICE come into a restaurant when you're eating and you know what those rights are, you might be able to be of assistance to any of the folks that ICE might try to snatch up while you're sitting there having a meal. So I want to encourage everybody, this information is not just for the people that might be directly impacted. And I want, because the point is that we're all directly impacted when our neighbors are being snatched off the street indiscriminately. So that we got through the slideshow. We have been trying to get through this for a minute now, and it's a lot of information. So,
It's a ton of information.
Yeah, a lot.
And I also just want to make the distinction, because we do have a lot of people that are listening from other countries. And I would be curious to know what your thought processes are. That is one thing about the U.S. being, the narrative powerhouse that it calls itself, is that there are all of these resources that are made available in some way, shape, or form for people to access, which is one of the things that our government is grappling with, and the reason why we don't have a budget that is passed, because we're making the distinction between whether or not we are putting money into social services, into human dignity, and to caring for people over profits, versus a majority of our money going into overcriminalization, militarization, and military defense. Right. And so that's what we're looking at as far as like, where is our priority and our value proposition as a global leader across the world. And as a both U.S. citizen and a Jamaican national citizen, I would choose humanity and social services as the place where my money goes, because our government does get a lot of taxes. And if I had the choice of what to do with those taxes, I would support social services and care for people.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. And that brings us back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of this episode, which was that the Jamaican culture and the Jamaican people see humans more important than property. And I want to encourage all of us. That's a huge teaching for all of us, especially in the U.S. territories, because that is not in a large, I know I'm painting with a broad brush, but that is not how our society focuses import in the U.S. And so, and that bleeds into every avenue, every corner,
it bleeds into
every
creating
culture.
Real safety.
Yeah,
is what I would say, is that's what creates real safety in communities.
Yeah,
when people have the things that they need and they're not over criminalized, penalized. Excuse me, did I say that right? Yeah, penalized. Excuse me, over criminalized, penalized, and provided with the resources that help communities to be safer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my friend, this was a long one, but it was
We're
packed
out.
full of information, and I really appreciate you taking the time because I know you've been busy on the
Mhm.
phone and trying to get folks together for rapid response. And how can you be of
Yes.
service, in on the U.S. territory, even though you're not back on the island yet. And so I really appreciate you taking the time out today to have this conversation. And by the time this drops next Tuesday, when you're listening to this, we will already be in a situation where, there are so many humans out there that need assistance on the U.S. territories as well as in the
Mhm.
islands that were impacted by the storm, as well as in Sudan,
Across the
as well
world.
as I mean, all around the world. Don't
We're
get
in.
overwhelmed. I just want to say that out loud. Don't get
Mhm.
overwhelmed because that feeds into the circumstance that a lot of us are taught, that we just get overwhelmed and go into our shells and don't do much of anything. So the way
Yeah.
that you can combat that, or the way that it works for me to combat that, is to get connected to people, to have conversations with humans, and to see where you can be of support to anyone that might be around you. So that's how you
Absolutely.
fight the
Feed
feeling of
into,
overwhelm.
I would offer that everyone should feed into empathy over apathy and be
Yes.
inspired to help someone that you may know.
Yes.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. All right.
All
Talk
right, my
soon.
friend. Yeah.
Um,
Talk soon with you. Bye.
bless.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks
I
for
give
joining
a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why
fuck?
Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Deanne. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.